coach, and I work with women to help them to slay their imposter syndrome, reduce those fears, work with a growth mindset, and really like build a resilient and positive attitude. My book, yay, Be Your Number One Cheerleader, has just come out, and we will be discussing obviously some key topics, thank you, from that book today. So without further ado, Heather, how are you today?
Oh, I am fantastic in sunny Washington, D.C. today. The sky is bright blue, and so is my heart. So things are going well here. And thank you so much for inviting me to join the crew this week and chat about silencing our inner critics.
Absolutely.
We all need to work on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when you told me your tip, I was like, no, we have to have this. Like, everyone needs to hear what you have to say, because it's such a powerful tip. And I can't wait for you to get into the meat of it. But before that, let me just ask you a bit about your background. So, what do you do? Why do you do it? Tell us a bit about your story, Heather.
Yeah. So I'm in IT executive leadership. I'm what's called an enterprise architect. For those of you who aren't terribly techie, what that really means is I work on very high level strategy for massive IT projects. So whether an organization has, like 500 employees or 500,000 employees, making investments into technology so that they're done right is a huge effort. And there needs to be a strategic view as well as an operational and executional view. So I'm kind of at that very high level of guidance, making sure that things do what they're supposed to do, that we're solving the right problems. So it's a discipline I've been involved with for going on almost 15 years now. So it's been an interesting ride.
Amazing. So let's dig in a bit deeper. So you call yourself a systems engineer. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Also, more excitingly, what does a NASA trained project manager mean? We're know about that.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So one of my taglines is that I'm a NASA trained systems engineer and project manager. And from a very technical perspective, what that means is that I have a very high level of rigor in the work that I do. Systems engineering is a particular engineering discipline that looks at the interconnectivity of systems with each other in order to actually, execute a function. And my enterprise architecture work is half systems engineering, so understanding how all the technical systems work together. And then the other half is that strategic planning and more social and influence aspect that comes from it being at an executive level. And project management, like NASA is known for not just its systems engineering rigor, but also its project management. I mean, how else does Hubble stay in the sky for 30 years when it was designed to last maybe 5? It's because of that rigor and that attunement to the mission that comes with just that workplace culture. So to me, that's what I'm meaning when I say that. And for people who know, they know.
Wow, that sounds super detailed and really technical. But I mean, what I'd really like to ask you next is what kind of environments have you been working with? Have you been working in a lot of environments where it's been male dominated? And what advice would you give to people trying to break through in those fields?
Yeah, so about that. So the IT workplace, I mean, historically has been we're lucky if women have been 30% of the workplace. Most of my technical workplaces have been somewhere around 20%, 25%. Where I'm at currently at the IMF, it's better and actually is actively improving because we have leadership that recognizes that that's something that must happen. And it's not just gender, but geographic representation as well. The enterprise architecture discipline is actually around 10% female.
Goodness.
So when I'm in meetings with peers at different organizations, it is very often that I'm the only woman in the room. And when it comes to my day-to-day work, it is also very often that I'm the only woman in the room. So it's definitely still a male-dominated field, especially the kinds of work and decisions that I have to weigh in on.
Goodness, wow. I mean, is there any tips you can give for someone who's like in that environment? Like, is there anything that you suggest to like, how can you hold your own or like feel like empowered to speak up? Because you have to, right?
So you're in the room because you have the expertise to be in the room. So unless you were specifically invited to please be a fly on the wall, just because, it's an FYI situation, if you're in the room, you belong at the table, your voice is there needing to be heard, whether you're a subject matter expert, whether you're an executive lead, whether you're a manager of people, or even if you're just the person taking the notes. We all start somewhere, right? Even if you're just the person there taking notes and you don't understand something and you know that's going to have an impact on what you are recording, speak up. You are there for a purpose. Otherwise, you would not be in the room.
For sure. And by the way, note-taking is very important.
It is. I mean, so something that I've done in my meetings is just so people don't undervalue the work and they engage more with the note taking, as I rotate who's going to be taking the notes. I'll myself take the turn, but as an executive, and as a woman, I also make sure that it's never a default expectation that myself or any woman is that go-to for taking notes. I will assign it to men first. I will go through all the men. So if it's a regularly recurring meeting, like every week, I assign it out to the men until I get to the women so that they understand how this is going to work. Undervalued, but there are ways to combat that.
Definitely. I mean, as someone who has been like a note taker before, like it's a skill, and it is really important that you obviously, record the correct actions and things that need to get done. So it's kind of funny that people think that like, oh, you're just a note taker, but you're not just a note taker.
No. I mean, it's a reference tool that you can always go back to. And for people who couldn't make the meeting for whatever reason, whether it was a doctor's appointment or they were triple booked for that time slot, those notes, those meeting minutes, however you're treating them, do matter, because, sure, we might have video recordings of some of these sessions or most of these sessions, but being able to say, is there anything here that I need to know? You can scan the notes and be done with it very quickly.
Yes, for sure. So let's move on to the topic of resilience. I mean, what does resilience mean to you, and how do you practice that in terms of like overcoming your own personal setbacks?
Yeah, so resilience is a learned trait. So you start with zero when you're a tiny kiddo, and throughout your life you encounter challenges, and how you respond to those is a product of your environment, of course. It's a product of the influence that people have on you, and then what you learn from that going forward, because we're all going to fail. It's what we learn in order to move on. Even if it was external factors, there's still something to learn, because maybe it could still happen again, but maybe you could see it coming a month, 3 months before it actually happens, and you can prepare differently. I feel that it has a lot to do with having a good analytical mindset. Okay, what happened? What do I need to learn about what happened? Is there anything that I could have done actually to prevent it or mitigate it, or simply know that it's coming? Because whether someone was directly at fault or not, that doesn't matter. The resilience is understanding how to make it better the next time. And that really goes for all of our work. Anytime you write a book, I'm sure you have a whole lot of lessons learned for yourself next time around. It's not that you did anything wrong. It's not that there's, necessarily abject failure, but you can say, it would have been better if. That goes into the pot for next time. I can and will do better. And sometimes that better is making it easier on myself.
For sure, for sure. And as you already opened with, you have such a broad experience in the corporate environment. So I would love to ask you a bit about being a woman in the corporate environment, and how have you sort of like managed to climb, and what have you seen that can help other women to make the same journey?
Yeah, so there's a phrase that a lot of women executives use, especially in the tech sphere, but it really just applies to any career. There is no one path to this. And even it may not look like a path that you would expect. It can be a bunch of zigzags all over the place. You may make moves that feel like a lateral from time to time, but you know that there's opportunity there. You may have someone who believes in your skills and is planning to help you advance, or it's just a matter of time. There isn't really a whole lot of work to be done. They just need to get you in the organization, and then things will take off. What really matters is building, and I'm going to reference your book. It might be a bit early, but one of the things that matters so deeply is creating a support network. You talk about this in your chapter 6. And finding people, whether they're inside of your organization, outside of your organization, people you would consider friends, people you would consider colleagues or professional acquaintances. Having that network of people who, at the very least, believe in you will go a very long way.
Sure. Network is important, and it's so easy to underestimate your network and who is in it, and who you're seeking advice from. But we will park that for one moment because we've got more to do with that. And then we will go on to the next question. So as we've already started talking about leadership, I was going to ask you, how can women who are seeking leadership positions develop their skills and find opportunities to practice?
Yeah. So always look for opportunities to, even if you wouldn't technically be having a job title or a role that says that you are the leader, find the leadership responsibilities in what you're doing every day, because that is then resume material. You can say that you led an activity, an effort. It doesn't even have to be a formal project. And where you can go with this is case studies. Because you can write about your experience. What was the situation? So what was the problem that my team or myself was trying to solve? What were the objectives? What were our expected outcomes from this? And then there are some parts here in the middle before you get to what those actual achieved outcomes were. What comes in the middle is, what did I do? And also, what did my team do? So you say I, and you say we. You have to have both, because in the workplace, there will be plenty of people who say I. And if they don't say we, you're not going to believe them, because no one does anything alone. And if you only say we, conversely, there will be the potential conception that, well, what did you do? Did your team just do this and you sat in a chair and observed? So you want to talk about both of what you did and your team did, the I and the we, to achieve an outcome. Sometimes it's failure. And what did you learn from it? So just like the resilience talk, when you're writing up case studies, they can be very short. What was the situation? What did I do? What did we do? What was the outcome? And what did I learn? Because from failure comes learning. You understand, oh, well, we were just absolutely terrible about how we were reporting our budget, so we didn't have insight and we underspent. And depending on the business that you're in, that's a terrible thing or a very good thing. So it's really, what did you learn out of the situation? And you can capture these in paragraph and bullet format, and they're excellent to give yourself a little bit of a lift if you need, oh, I am not feeling good today. I have something major going on, and I need a mood lifter. I need an ego lift. You can always refer back to these. They're great for preparing for interviews for new jobs. They're a great way for you to see your work differently as well. So if you're putting together your resume, instead of just responsible for, you can say led, achieved, produced. It's an excellent tool that I would recommend for everyone. Is, those achievements or even the failures where you did learn something significant, write them down. They can become excellent small case studies.
No, that is a really great tip, and also can be applied to a performance review or appraisal situation too. So I think that we should all, take that under our hat and try to apply that when we need to. Yeah. Speaking of the career ladder, what's your experience been of male allies and helping women to climb the ladder, or either get mentorship and support to reach those kind of board positions? Yeah.
So every step in my career since I came to DC, which was more than 10 years ago now, it's actually come through my network. And those champions and sponsors in my network actually have all been men. Yeah, I mean, I've had excellent women mentors and coaches, and they were invaluable. But for me, the connections that actually led to a job came from their advocacy. So don't rule out guys when you're looking to your network and looking for people who believe in you enough to champion you and put your name forward when they're in a conversation. Say, yeah, Heather, I need you to look at this resume. I need you to think about this person when you're going to be hiring for that role. So it's actually been the guys who came through for me. They know the influence they have, and good, strong feminist guys, they will do this. They absolutely will. So don't exclude them from that support network, whether it's friends, through work acquaintances.
No, definitely, 100%. So now we come to the question of the hour, which I'm so excited to dig into, which is the inner critic. What does that mean to you, Heather? And tell us your tip. Oh, so excited. Go for it.
Yeah. So the inner critic is that voice in the back of our mind that will creep up on us when we're tired, when we've experienced failure, or we're looking like we might end up experiencing failure because things just aren't lining up, people aren't cooperating, you name it. You're down about something. You have low energy about something. And the thoughts creep in of, oh, am I actually qualified to do this? So-and-so would be so better suited than this. Sometimes that might be true, but it's your work. It was given to you for a reason, whether you asked for it or whether it was simply assigned to you because that's the roles and responsibilities of your job. It's still your work to do. So 1, embrace that. 2, if you're stretching for kind of hope and something that you haven't exactly done before, but you've done things like it. So it'll take some learning, it'll take some growing, it'll take some stretching to do it. That inner critic can creep into and say, oh, you've never pulled this off. This could just fail. And you might not even know it until it happens. Well, I said before, no one goes into anything alone. And unless you are a solo astronaut, and by the way, they're not alone either, no one is truly alone. There are colleagues. There are people who are specifically there to back you up. So if we want to take this space metaphor again, the people who built Hubble were only part of the team, because there was the broad team of like the communications network, the people in the manufacturing facilities who were polishing the literal, like lenses and mirrors of the assembly. You are never alone. And you are not necessarily the only person with your expertise. So reach out to the people that you know. It's not always a burden. It may take a little bit of their time. So be realistic when you ask for that kind of help, when you ask for some time. If it really is a conversation that would take 5 minutes, ask someone for 5 minutes. If it takes an hour, if it takes 6 months of weekly meetings, then that's what it takes. But don't be afraid to ask. People actually like to help.
For sure, for sure. Okay. Why don't we dig into the concepts of the personal board? Tell us more about that and like where we can get resources about that, because that was like so mind-blowingly told to me.
Yeah. So like I started doing this years ago, and then I found out it was a real thing. Like McKinsey actually teaches about this, cool. And I can share an article with you from a couple of years ago that I bumped into that I love sending people when they're like, "Tell me more about this." So a couple of their interviewees talk about it. But the idea of forming your own personal advisory board is one where you actually designate people who would be part of your deliberate support network, not just friends who you dump on and will pet you and let you cry when something just went terribly awfully. This is a board of people who you can use to do gut checks on decisions that you want to make, whether it's, for career moves, like I need references, or can you tell me anything you know about this organization that I'm considering going to work for? They're telling me that the culture is XYZ. What do you know about it? Who can advise you on those topics, all the way from things like that to, like salary negotiation strategies. Like, guys, I don't even know what's in the realm of possibility for this. Help me out. Or also, in your everyday work life of, I'm running this giant program with all of these different components and moving parts, and I'm having communication problems, and this is what's happening. Do you have any insight? You can use these boards. What I love is setting up a group of about 10 trusted people. You don't necessarily want close friends on this because you want people to be brutally honest with you. And you're not there for soothing. You're not there for therapy. You are there to gain insight so that you can take action. That's its purpose. So very close friends, unless you have a brutally honest friend. But these are going to be people that you respect from either directly in your career, some other associations that you might be involved in, like I'm involved in this group. I'll talk about them more later if there's time, called UpwardWomen. It's a global network for executive women. I actually have put together some members of my own personal board through this group because there are other women in these high pressure, male dominated fields doing executive work. So they know those challenges in a way that someone in a different role wouldn't necessarily. So depending on the question, I can pull from this group of 10 people and say, hey, can I have a one-on-one conversation with you and you? Or can we all have a quick, 20-minute, 25-minute call, and I invite 5 folks and 3 can make it. So we can have that conversation. And in your own workplaces, I've actually taken this model And for the Women in IT group at the IMF, I've brought this together for all of us so that we can have a go-to place for these kinds of conversations. We kind of had to stop it as a regularly occurring once a week time slot at the beginning of COVID, but we've kind of phased it back in. And in the meantime, we did ad hoc meetings. But having that standing time with a small-ish group of people where you know at least 5 folks are going to show up, you can bring your problem or challenge. You spend maybe 5 minutes giving that pitch or posing that question, because sometimes you might want feedback on an idea of like, please criticize me so I can make my pitch stronger. Or you might be looking for insight on how to solve a problem. But if 5 people can show up, 5 people can converse and contribute. And from a very pragmatic standpoint, it can lift you up. And all they need is to spend, that half an hour, or if it's a larger group, you set the parameters on what the time burden is for it. But you can get really quick, succinct answers by asking each of the people that you've shared with for their feedback for about 3 minutes. You don't have to be deep and painful conversations unless you need to, but you can always have those as a follow-up.
Oh, let us talk about the accountability aspect of this formation.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to, you assemble the people, you have the talk, and how does accountability play into this? Like, how are you held accountable to what you say you're going to do?
Yeah, it kind of has built-in accountability, because if someone suggests you do something and they're not just your friend, if these are people from your workplace or some of your other professional organizations, your professional reputation is on the line. So if you commit to something after you've gained feedback, share back with them what you believe your next steps need to be. Sometimes that next step is, I need to stew on this for a while because I have completely miscalculated what I need to do. And then the action is, I'll get back to you with what I think that needs to be. Sometimes the follow-up is, I'll introduce you to so-and-so. Great. I'm going to make sure that I have talked to them in the next week, or I've set up a meeting, and always just report back. If you have these as regularly standing meetings, like every Wednesday morning at 8:30 a.m., y'all get together for half an hour. The next one, just report back and say, I did it and thank you. Have your motivation for accountability be based in saying thank you to the people who've helped you. The best way to thank them, of course, acknowledging them verbally with a thank you, but that you value the feedback that they gave you, is having that brief follow-up that says, I did something with your advice.
No, amazing. And just remind us how it kind of circles back around to the people in the group, like how it can be not just for holding you and your particular challenges, but you getting the opportunity to do the reverse.
Yeah, and like as someone who advises others on these like roundtable panels, I love knowing that my advice actually helped. That drives me to stay involved with these, even if I'm not necessarily bringing problems there myself. Whether I need a gut check or advice to solve a problem, I see it as a way to give back. It's also a great way to get some validation too. So if those inner critics, those brain gremlins are really getting you down, you can go and participate in one of these groups and help to advise. And you can have those moments of, whew, yes, I do have knowledge. I do have expertise. It did help people. So if you don't have a whole lot of those wins in your life, even just participating in these panels to, these little mini personal boards to help people out can go a long way to giving you some of those affirmations and the endorphins that go along with them.
Yes, that is really, really helpful, actually. One of the questions I'm just gonna ask on this topic is, how often should you change your board?
That depends. I mean, you might find that some folks who wanted to help you are just completely unavailable, and be honest with them and just ask them, like, I know you wanted to help, but you can't. Do you want me to come back to you in 6 months and see if, your availability has changed so that you could participate more? So you can switch them out. If you find that any of your board members are dealing with burnout, always check in with them, because maybe you do want to switch someone out. And I'd say if you have a trusted group that is really performing well together, maybe don't switch it out, maybe add a few more. Because these groups will always be subject to people's availability. So you have that broad group of 10, and, any given time, 3 to 5 might be available to get together and do things. That's just the nature of how this goes, because this is personal and not part of your work schedule. Things will get bumped, et cetera, et cetera. Try to prioritize it. Everyone does seem to, when I've talked about these before, they do try to prioritize it, but it's not always possible. So it might be, if you have a good, reliable, steady group and there's no reason to switch people out, maybe add a few more.
Nice. Definitely. Now I'm thinking of something that was just coming to me. Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah. And be deliberate when you choose people. You don't want to ignore guys. You don't necessarily need it to be all women, because men can absolutely and should be part of these groups for you. Depending on the topic, you might not choose to tap them for a given conversation, but they absolutely should be part of your core group. Look for people who are both in your field and outside of your field, people who are at slightly different levels or different roles than you. Because, there's the idea of reverse mentoring, of, executives being mentored by more entry-level people in their organization. Part of it's age, part of it's experience, part of it's just functioning in very different parts of an organization and different organizations. But try to find variety. Find people older than you, find people younger, different geographic and racial and background. Variety is going to give you better and broader insight. You don't want an echo chamber. That is not what this is for. You should be confronted about your ideas and challenged on them. So if this group just says, oh, that's a great idea, and has no real feedback, there's no point. You can take that to your friends. That's a great idea. You should do it.
No, I totally get it. No, it's a very different reason for being. It's more of a challenge process, challenge to improve, challenge to learn, challenge to reflect, and challenge to really think about, gosh, I could do it some differently than I had anticipated, or even conceived that notion in my mind. So that is I think the real power in this whole setup. So I wanted to ask you about resources. Apart from the McKinsey article, is there any other books or things that you would say that people could look for to help them start this process if they were starting from scratch and they had no idea how to get this going?
Oh man. So there are, all right, I'm going to make a pitch for a book, and it's not necessarily going to sound relevant, but it totally is. Okay. It is called Burnout, How Millennials Became the Burnout Generation. While I'm technically an Xer, I tend to identify a lot more with millennial culture, ways of thinking, belief about work and personal life, and like a lot of the values I tend to ascribe very much more to the millennial way of thinking, even though I'm on the other side of the 1980 divide. It goes into how valuable support networks are.
Mm-hmm.
And how there is a cultural shift getting into the transition from you have to leave your work at work in order to have a balanced life, and accepting that there is a significant part of the population that finds personal value from the work that they do, and that it isn't necessarily a bad thing, except when you can't find balance and set boundaries when you need to. I would definitely recommend that book, Burnout: How Millennials Became the Burnout Generation. Like, I don't know, even if you're an older Xer, you should read this, because I think like there were enough crises early enough in careers of older Xers as well, to see how boom bust economies and cultural shifts have actually influenced you in a way that you might not like. It just, shine a light on some things. And if you're in a leadership position, the whole book just contains a goldmine on leading teams and what you may be observing as a manager or as a leader isn't a stereotypical brattiness or self-centeredness that a lot of media actually plays up about millennials and is starting to, do for like Gen Z as well. It's like, it's generational warfare nonsense. What we should be doing is working to understand people, the situations that they're from, and how that has shaped them. Because they're, like with anything, there are both risks and opportunities. And if we have some better insight into that, we can lead our teams better. We can interact with our peers better. And, as far as silencing the inner critic, there's also a little bit of self-reflection of, have I experienced these kinds of challenges? And here's how it affected this group of people. Has it also affected me that way as well? Because the answer might be yes. And then you have a little bit of insight and you can act accordingly.
Well, that is really interesting. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great read.
It's still just in hardback, but it's pretty good. Actually going to be using it for a basis of conversation at the DC chapter meeting of Upward. We used to do this in-person breakfast cafe for like 2 hours once a month. We're doing those virtual now, and I'm going to be referring to that book a lot, mostly from the perspective of executives leading teams. And this is what you really need to know about millennials, not this other, generational warfare nonsense. Because I think it's playing into the problems that we have now with COVID and work from home, and also the stresses of people who do not have the option to work at home. And it shines so much light on the situations. It's a good book, and it's pretty easy to read, pretty fast.
Is it a short read or a long read?
No, I finished it in about a week, and I didn't have to, like grind through it. I'd say grand total, like maybe 6 hours.
Okay, cool.
Not too bad. No.
Oh, amazing. Okay, yes. So now I'm going to ask you my exciting question, which is, you hopefully had a chance to read the book. I'd love for you to share some insights from the book, and also relating to the topic of the inner critic, like anything you think would be helpful for this discussion today.
Yeah. So I really want folks to look at your chapter 6. That is establishing that support network. Like, my particular tips were very focused on formal constructions of a support network, but you get into topics that are somewhat less formal. You know, you can talk about mentoring, coaching, sponsoring kinds of relationships, but then there's just the personal contact. You know, you do have your friend groups, because sometimes you do need to just whine and bitch, and that's fine. That's fine, because someone there saying you are justified in how you feel can just, okay, great. I am justified. Those inner voices that are like, you're imagining things. No, that validation that you get from friends when they just listen to you and say, oh, that's awful, actually has meaning. But there are all of these other structures in between. And some of it is just a basic network that could bring you a new job, that could bring you a new idea, these conversations. And right now it's so hard to do, because you're not just going to bump into people in a hallway. You're not going to be working at a cafe in the early morning and bump into someone you haven't seen in 6 years who's like, oh my gosh, so-and-so is hiring. I didn't even think of you. And magic happens. So like those connections, your support network is far more than just a place to get jobs or a shoulder to cry on. It really can help you grow and challenge yourself, and try to leverage it right now. It's so hard. Make a point of it. Ask people for their time. They do want to help. And if they're burnout on Zoom meetings, then do a phone call. Yeah. Or if you're in an area that you can go and have a coffee outside, go and have a coffee outside. Do what you can, but don't forget that it's such a critical aspect of our lives. And I know how much I'm suffering from it right now. So even I need to be more deliberate about engaging my support network and not just kind of squirreling away with a few trusted friends. Because I need more than that to keep myself going.
And have you found any particular ways to kind of like make virtual networking work for you? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, but it depends on the people. Like, get involved with, if you aren't already, or re-engage yourself. So if there are professional organizations that you have belonged to in the past, and maybe in the last 8 months, you've kind of not, even attended any of their virtual events. Yeah, Zoom burnout is real.
Yeah.
But, maybe, brew yourself a strong cup of tea and attend one. And getting just back in contact with folks. I mean, little events like this, and I see like Bernadette here, connect with people on LinkedIn when you bump into them. I mean, LinkedIn is just, it feels so artificial, but you can also dive into it with genuine energy. Interact with people on their posts. If someone's written an article, please, for the love of God, interact with them. If they have written an article, thumbs up, read their content, like the post. Because if we aren't bumping into people in the hallways, we aren't, out and about in the world where that can happen, make do with what you have. Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, it's boring. It doesn't seem totally genuine, but you can't lose those opportunities, because your career could stagnate, your mental state could stagnate too. So just try to find those joys and those interactions where you can. Maybe even just get involved in like a neighborhood association. So like, I don't know, your apartment building has a listserv, join it. Read the posts occasionally, respond to them occasionally, because you never know where this support network can end up helping you later on. And if people can feel that they're getting to know you in some way, you will be on their mind when an opportunity or an idea that connects with you actually lands with them. Don't forget, people love to help.
It's true. It's true. And I like to tell people about what I call the silent sales force of people like who know you and would speak about you when you're not in the room. And even if you haven't like spoken to them for like a while, like, you've already made the effort to be in connection with them, build a relationship. Then, someday they might be like, hey, out the blue, do you still, work in this area? Are you still interested in these kinds of things? Or, it's so great, as you said, and it's not even just through professional activity. It could be, like, as you say, through a local community activity, because we all do other things and all wear many hats. So I think you're definitely right with those tips there. So just to kind of, before we wrap up, I would really love to ask you, what keeps you going, in these horrible and sort of, restricted COVID times? What do you do to keep yourself more positive and more, resilient and hopeful for the future?
Yeah. So for me, I'm a person who loves change. I love the challenge of figuring out new things. I love solving those kinds of problems. So, being a leader in IT has meant that there were lots of new problems to solve at the beginning of this. So like the first 3 or 4 months, we were completely changing the way that the organization did our work. Like, yeah, we had some basic virtual capabilities, but addressing the challenge of bringing everyone over to fully virtual, it was fun. I loved the challenge. It was energizing. And then kind of this summer, once that challenge was effectively solved, I found myself thinking, okay, well, I'm bored now. What really should I be working on? So I found myself some new projects. I actually talked to the CIO, and I'm now working on revamping a bunch of policies, like internal operating policies, not like externally facing advice that we give the world. But, just internal, how do we operate?
Yeah.
What changes do we need to make to take advantage of all of these advances in technology and productivity and community building that we've done during the beginning of COVID times? Let's make sure that our policies don't create roadblocks for that to continue. And then externally, I have been involved in actually writing a formal publication for the IMF. It's a follow-up to one that we published. I wasn't one of the authors then. It's been like 3 years now that it's been out. It's called Digital Revolutions in Public Finance. I mean,
Amazing.
Our audience is like, yeah, so it's, like finance ministers, but we realized that we needed a second book to follow up with this one, to like catch up with everything that has happened in 3 years, but then also giving much more direct advice to these giant organizations that are country governments and their, ministries of finance and treasury, et cetera, and how to digitize their work. And in the meantime, make it more transparent and accountable. And all of these very modern, technologically driven concepts of just good, solid business practices, but enabled through technology. So I've been involved in our part 2 that should be coming out. We'll see how schedules go, because COVID is weird times. But we're expecting that might come out in Q2 of 2021.
Nice.
And it's awesome to be involved with some big picture thinking, and again, having people who value my expertise in a very different way, not just leading, being part of the leadership of an IT organization, but also helping the greater world, different communities who have these same concerns. Like, everyone's got the same problems, they just sound different. But being able to help people that way as well, like that part actually feels like giving back to me, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Wow, that is pretty awesome. We will watch out for that. So just before we wrap up, tell us anything you'd like to share about what you're up to these days.
So I have to say, Ekua, you have inspired me. I haven't been doing a lot of my own personal writing recently. And, you got your book together. I have some other friends who are publishing like totally different spheres and topics. But like last year, this time, I signed up for a Medium membership so that I could publish. Mm-hmm. And I never did anything with it. Like just about the time I felt like I was going to get into it and even just make like short posts once a week, COVID hit, and I was having 60-hour work weeks trying to solve that problem. So I'm going to pick it up again, and I'll probably start with LinkedIn, because like, let's talk about microblogging, fine. Let's use the platform, build the habit. So maybe look for different snippets of things from me on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like linked in Heather Diehl, pretty easy to find. And then once I start doing slightly larger format content, I'll be posting links there to find me on Medium. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to be talking about digital transformation. I'm going to be talking about women in tech.
Yep.
I'm going to be talking about, like executive leadership. Like, it's just things that are in my world that I have opinions on and have seen the good and the bad. It's going to be a little bit of everything. So I'm doing it.
That's great. I think people have so much to learn from you and your experience. So yeah, I cannot wait to see that. I'll be watching for that now. You share this publicly with us.
Yeah, and definitely. I'd just like to say, Heather, I mean, you've got such an inspirational story, and thank you for sharing. And I mean, I'm not so great on social media and LinkedIn and things like that, but I'll certainly be looking out for your posts.
Awesome. Well, see, there's my accountability. I have someone who's like actually going to check and see if I've done something in in the next few weeks. Oh, there might be someone who cares.
No, absolutely.
Yes, we're cheering, definitely. So Heather, before we go, please do tell us about the boards, the nonprofit that you're a member of.
So UpwardWomen, it's particularly tailored to women who are already in executive and leadership roles. It's not people who are trying to get there. There are lots of organizations out there for that. Look at yourself on the totally local level for those. Women in IT organizations, women in HR, whatever your discipline is, there's probably a local version of it, maybe women focused, maybe very broad industry focused. Get involved with those. But UpwardWomen is a global network for executive women. So if you've been like a director, an entrepreneur, where you're really running, soup to nuts, full life cycle of a business, or like director, VP, SVP, blah blah blah. It's an excellent organization. I mean, there are even London, Buenos Aires, I think there's one in Bangalore, and like new chapters are popping up everywhere. Major cities in the US have them, like New York, San Francisco, DC, obviously, Chicago. The major cities all have these local chapters. But in the meantime, until we can actually see each other in person again, the groups are hosting online events, which means anyone from anywhere can attend them. So if you do have the kinds of career and business concerns of, executive leadership, not just people management, but organizational leadership, check out UpwardWomen. You can Google us, but I'll definitely send the link for you to be able to post with us along with the McKinsey article and everything else. But like if that is something that would be of service to you, those kinds of topics would be of use to you, definitely do get involved, because these groups are still rocking and rolling during COVID times, and it means you don't have to show up to a breakfast in order to have the conversation.
Amazing. And are there any opportunities to get involved directly at the moment?
Yes. Membership to Upward is actually free. So you can have access to all the calendar of events. Many of them are truly free, like they're virtual. There's no like $10 fee to attend. The organization does support itself on event fees, which when we were doing things in person was easy. Like, oh, we're going to do a dinner and it's $80, or we're going to have a speaker come in and it's $15 and there are refreshments. Like it's all over the place depending on what's actually going on. We then bring in speakers or folks who run workshops, and the fees, of course, are higher for those events, but it's all based on the actual cost of executing the event. Sometimes we have sponsors and it doesn't cost anything. But you can definitely get involved that way. And as these chapters across the world are popping up, they are looking for people like me, potentially like you, to sit on the board and do the work to actually run these local chapters. So hit me up or express your interest with UpwardWomen on the web, sign up. And I think actually when you do sign up your email, there's a ticky box. I would love to get more involved in the leadership. Do that because as these groups grow and the demand for events and activities grows, the more help that the chapters need.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Heather. Like, you have shared some really powerful insights with us, like creating your own personal board. I think that was super interesting because, the diversity of thought that is involved in actually getting people together. And it's not just like, your close friends. It's actually something that is more of a challenge shop than a pat you on the back and sort of soothing place. And that is the beauty of it, because sometimes it's hard to know where to find different voices that you trust to give you the honest truth.
Yeah, because you still want that love, you still want that affection and commiseration, but sometimes you need the hard truth, and you need people to help you make sometimes some very hard decisions. So don't forget that corner of your network.
For sure. Well, thank you so much. I cannot wait to share this on the replay.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Happy to do it.
Oh, thank you. And take care and see you soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.